Okay, so we're diving into a really fascinating psychological mystery today. It's something that kind of turns a concept we all know and love on its head: emotional intelligence. We're always told it's this golden ticket to being successful, to having great relationships. But what if it has a dark side?
And that's really the big question we're tackling. Is it possible for someone who's super emotionally intelligent to use that skill for, manipulation and just for their own personal gain? Could this thing we see as a total positive actually be a tool for something, well, something much darker?
So first, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. Emotional intelligence, or EI for short, is basically your ability to understand and handle emotions. That means your own feelings, but also being able to read and influence the feelings of others. People with high EI, they're the ones we think of as empathetic, great listeners. They're the good guys, right?
Now let's introduce the villains of our story, the dark triad. This is a group of 3 personality traits that are, well, pretty much as shady as they sound. You've got narcissism, which is all about being self-important and grandiose. Then there's Machiavellianism, which is basically being a master manipulator. And finally, psychopathy, which is marked by being impulsive and really insensitive to others' feelings.
So you look at these two side by side and they seem like they're from different planets. EI is about connecting with people, right? And the dark triad is all about using people. This huge contrast is exactly what's had psychologists scratching their heads for years, because, let's be honest, the real world is never that simple.
And that brings us to the heart of the debate. For the longest time, there have been 2 totally different schools of thought on how emotional intelligence and these dark traits could possibly interact.
So theory 1 is pretty simple. EI and dark traits are like oil and water. They just don't mix. If you have a lot of one, you must have very little of the other. But theory 2, that one is way more chilling. It suggests that someone with high dark traits could also be highly emotionally intelligent, and that they'd use that EI as a weapon for manipulation. This is the whole dark EI idea, the evil genius who can read your emotions and play you like a fiddle.
Now, the really wild part is that for decades, the research on this has been a total mess. Some studies said, yes, they're opposites. Others found no connection at all. A few even found a weird link between being narcissistic and having high EI. So the whole debate was basically stuck in a rut.
That is, until a brand new study came along. The researchers behind it wanted to try a completely different approach to finally get some clear answers. Let's dig into what they actually did.
See, the old way of doing things was just looking for a simple link between, say, psychopathy and EI, and that just wasn't working. So these researchers tried what's called a person-centered approach. Think of it like this. Instead of just measuring individual ingredients, they looked at the whole recipe. They sorted over 1,200 people into distinct clubs or profiles based on their entire personality mix.
And their goal was really straightforward, to see what kinds of people are actually out there in the real world. Would they find that evil genius club, the ones with high scores in both EI and dark traits? Or would they find a club of pure saints with sky-high EI and absolutely zero dark traits?
And this, right here, is where things get really, really interesting. Because what they found wasn't at all what anyone was expecting. The clear heroes and villains that psychology had been debating for so long, turns out they might not even exist.
That's right. The data showed no sign of a dark EI profile. But, and this is just as important, it also found no evidence of a purely good guy profile with amazing EI and zero dark traits. Instead, they uncovered 3 totally different and way more complicated personality types.
Okay, so first up is the non-dark and non-EI profile. This was about 23% of the people. Now, this group had super low levels of dark traits, which sounds great, but here's the catch. They also had low emotional intelligence. So they're not malicious, but they're not exactly experts at navigating social situations either.
Next, we have the dark profile, which was about 28% of the group. Now, this one lines up perfectly with that first old theory. These people scored really high on all the dark triad traits, but their emotional intelligence was low. This kind of confirms the idea that people with truly dark personalities are often, well, emotionally clueless.
But this last one, this is the real bombshell. It's the most common profile by a long shot. This group, making up almost half of everyone in the study, had high emotional intelligence. But they didn't have zero dark traits, nope. They had low levels of Machiavellianism and psychopathy, but average levels of narcissism. Let's unpack what that actually means. This whole finding really puts narcissism under the microscope. In fact, a lot of researchers are now starting to call it the bright member of the dark triad because it just doesn't seem to work in the same harmful way as the other two.
And just think about that number, 48.5%. We're talking about nearly 1 out of every 2 people. This isn't some tiny niche group. This combination, high emotional skill and a normal dose of narcissism, is the most common profile out there.
And here's where it gets even crazier. This profile wasn't just the most common, it was also the most, well, successful. These were the people who reported having the best well-being, the highest self-esteem, and the fewest psychological problems.
I mean, just look at this chart. It's night and day. The average narcissistic and high EI group is at the top for self-esteem and well-being and at the bottom for personal distress and psychological issues. The other two groups, they fared way, way worse. It almost seems like having high emotional intelligence without that bit of narcissism might actually be less healthy.
So, what are we supposed to do with all of this? I mean, these findings really make you stop and rethink how we label personality traits as simply good or bad. The reality is so much more complicated.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote from the researchers themselves says it all. Not only did they not find the evil genius, but they also couldn't find the perfect emotional saint. The idea of a person with incredible emotional skills and absolutely zero dark traits, it just might be a fantasy.
So let's just boil this all down. What are the big takeaways? First, the manipulative mastermind with dark EI is probably a myth, or at least it's not a common type of person. Second, the purely good saint with high EI and no dark side is also probably a myth. Third, the most common and psychologically healthy profile actually combines high EI with a totally normal amount of narcissism, which might just be another word for self-confidence. And finally, all of this points to narcissism being a totally different beast from its so-called dark siblings. And that leaves us with one heck of a final thought. If the most successful, well-adjusted people have a touch of what we've always called a dark trait, what does that mean for how we teach things like emotional intelligence? Are we maybe doing it wrong by trying to stamp out every last trace of ego or self-focus? It's a really complex question, but it's one this new research says we absolutely have to start asking. Thanks for digging into this with me.